David, I'm so excited to speak with you today. Another SEO nerd, so to speak, and we're really going to dive deep into link building. But before we get into all of that, take me back to the beginning. How did you get into SEO, and then how did you get into just specializing in link building?
So, first of all, Chris, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been following these podcasts and really have learned a lot, enjoyed them, and truly appreciate the opportunity to be
Awesome.
able to talk links and SEO with you. My name is David Farkas. We are the upper ranks and we specialize in link building, but we started around 11 years ago. And I'd say before the 11 years, I sort of got into SEO on my own, some side projects, and then I got pretty good at it. And I was talking to a friend, and he put me in touch with a company, which happened to be a pretty big company for a starter. And I kind of just took it on, and I went from there, and I just got the ball and started running. So when we initially started, we were more offering more of a general SEO services and doing different aspects of on-site as well as link building. And then I'd say over the past 8 years, we really narrowed our focus and have really honed into link building. It was a part that I personally really enjoyed and appreciated. And it was something that I was able to connect with, and the creativity and everything that goes into that aspect. So yeah, more or less, that's what we've been focusing on for the past 8 years, and we haven't turned back since.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight that because Google was founded on using links to categorize the search results. So you really focused on one of the key elements and just went all in there, huh?
Yeah, and that 100% true. And that has always more or less been one of the primary signals that Google relies on as sort of giving a site credibility. They look for links. It's kind of like a vote, and it's a way how different parts of the internet from different parts of the world could connect, and they could all come together. And it's always been such an important factor and a major ranking factor. The game has changed more recently, but the one thing that hasn't changed is the importance of links and how it's a core ranking necessity for anyone that really wants to be relevant in a competitive niche.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Google wants you to write content, and they think that people are going to just visit your site, kind of field a dream style. If you build it, they will come. But the reality is that's just not true, particularly in the legal vertical. You have to be very intentional about link building.
Yeah, 100%. And that attitude where you just have a great website and just watch the leads come in. Every correlation study has proven that that's not really going to get you very far if you don't really have a strategy on how you're actually going to promote your site from an internet standpoint, and really get your name out there. And the more that you put your name out there, and the more that people are talking about you, and like what you're saying, the more you create great content on your site, which is necessary as well. So those are the signals that you're really going to need if you want to be a player in a competitive niche, like you said, like the legal niche. Maybe you could get by like in some small industry, and it's some local small industry, and you could get by with very few links. But when you're dealing with anything which is any level of some level of competitiveness, so you're definitely going to have to bring a lot more to the table than just a great website.
Yeah, 100% agree. So let's toss the softball out here, because if I ask this question to 99 SEO specialists, you're going to get a bunch of different answers. What makes a great link? Is it organic traffic? Is it relevancy? What in your eyes makes a great backlink?
So that's a good question. And I'd say that there are a number of different factors when you're trying to evaluate the quality of a link. So like you mentioned a few. So number one is that like the website that's linking to you. So that website, is that a credible website? Does that website have traffic? That's something which is pretty basic. You want to make sure that the website has a pulse. And then I'd also look around that website. Does that website have any sort of editorial standards? And of course, you want high editorial standards, or do they just let any sort of content on their site, even low quality? And then of course, relevance is a major factor as well. So that's the first thing that I'd say, is looking at the linking website that's linking to you. But I feel like these days Google has gotten more advanced in that, and that's not enough. And they're looking at other things as well. So besides for the website that's linking to you, what are they linking to on your website? Are they linking to a great piece of content? Or are they just linking to like your services page or your money page, or things of that nature? Because I feel that Google has certainly come a long way, and they're much more advanced and a lot better at recognizing what sort of content is actually link worthy and merits having someone link to it from their site. And that's why when you think about link building these days, you also really have to take into account like your on-site strategy and how you're going to provide for your users meaningful content if you really want to have the full benefit of the links pointing to your site. So basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not just good enough to just look at it from an external point of view. You also have to look where the links are pointing on your site, and if it's meeting up. If you have all of your links just pointing to your money pages, so Google doesn't probably give that link very much value, since they don't really see what value that link is adding from to the linking site. It's not really adding much value to the site that's linking to you. So when the site that's linking to you is linking to a quality piece of content, so then those two things like complement each other, and then that link has a lot more effectiveness. And along those lines, the third thing that I'd probably look at when I'm thinking about what makes a link good is also looking at it from the perspective of the user. So if they're on this site and they're linking on that link that links to your site, so when they follow through and they click on that link, are they going to be pleased when they end up on the other end of that link and on the other side on your site? Are you actually, again, are you providing something valuable, or are you just trying to have some sort of sales pitch and you were able to crank in a link and stuff one into this site? So those are more or less the three things that I look at. The most obvious is the linking website. Then perhaps maybe less obvious, but something which I feel is a very big factor these days, is where are they linking to on your site? And again, how is that link adding value in where it's situated on the linking website? And then also, from the user standpoint, you definitely don't want to let them down. You want to come through if if they trusted you and they're clicking on the link, you don't want to fail them and send them to someone's money page where you're trying to sell them a service that's certainly probably not what they had in mind when they were clicking. So those are a few things that I'd take into consideration.
Well, I think that's great. And I think that's different than what many individuals have been told or have heard, because, we did a study recently where we looked at 113,000 personal injury sites, and we looked at the top directories like FindLaw. And what was interesting is it aligns completely with what you're saying. FindLaw itself has a whole bunch of links to the root domain and to their law pages and pages that have been sourced by the media. But the actual directories themselves, those sales pages, don't have hardly any links at all, but yet they still rank really well. So it aligns with what you're saying in terms of
Yeah,
relevancy.
100%. And Google is able to look at that website, and they're able to categorize the site itself, and they understand site structure much better, and they understand what money pages are and what sort of content you're creating as a means to provide meaningful and helpful and educational information. So they could take care of that on their own. You have to focus in on having a solid site, and then building links to the pieces of content that actually merit having links, as opposed to just trying to shoehorn your links and get them to pages that really don't make any sense that someone would really want to link to. So definitely I see that Google is taking sort of the external SEO and the internal SEO, and they're kind of bridging the gap, and they're saying, they're trying to see how these two things could connect even in a more essential way, and where these two pieces of content are actually talking to each other and complementing each other, as opposed to, it's just a one-sided thing, and, the external link is just pointing to you, but really it doesn't add up.
I love all that and completely agree. And it's just they're becoming more advanced, and they're looking at multiple factors. And as we all know, that UX and the core vitals and the importance there. And let me ask you a question. And this is more for an awareness type of thing. Back in the day, you could write a 500 word article and it might rank. There wasn't a ton of competition. It would get crawled. And the competition has really increased the requirements for word count on ranking content. You're looking at these long form pieces of content for pages that have short phrases, and then long tail phrases can still be shorter content. But as it pertains to link building, let's say a site that has high authority that everyone knows, like a DR80 or D80, something high, but the content on that site is maybe 300 words. Is that still going to pass equity and authority back to the other site, or is it just not going to get crawled and it doesn't even matter?
So I think that if you're having a link from a site which is a high DA or DR, a high authority site, um, so obviously I think that it's possible that that goes a long way, but again, that's just looking at it in a very black and white type of approach. But like what you're saying, if let's say the link is coming from a high authority site, but it's on a very weak piece of content or the content is not relevant, so of course, Google's going to take everything into account, and they don't just look at authority blindly, but they take the whole picture and they want to take in the topical relevance as well. So if you're going to have a link from a higher authority site, but nothing else, nothing else makes sense and nothing else adds up, so then that's certainly going to diminish your returns, and I don't see that having as good of an effect as something on a lower authority site, but the article is rich and it's a strong article and it relates very well to your site. So you really have to kind of take everything into account. But yeah, if you're just trying to get away like the easy, cheap way, and somehow you figured out how to get a link on a DR80 plus, but once you got that link, you just decided to write a 300-week article, so you kind of lost out over there. You lost a great opportunity. And honestly, I'm not sure how common that sort of an example is, because I think for the most part, when you're dealing with high authority sites, so they're going to have some sort of editorial standards, and then they're not just going to let any slim article through that's very weak on the content side. So for the most part, if you were able to get that link, that's a question mark right there. How did you pull that one off? Did you just submit it and they have some sort of a form where you could just submit links? So I don't know if Google considers that anything as well. So just a few things to keep in mind.
I love all of that, and I think that's a great piece of advice when you get those opportunities to really take hold of them and maximize those opportunities. One of the things that drives me absolutely insane is for every attorney listening, I'm sure you've been bombarded by emails that they start out and say, hey, you have 100 toxic links. You need to remove these toxic links before you can rank. And then I look at the prospect site and they've got 200 links total. They don't have hardly any links. So kind of what's your thoughts on toxic links, the disavow file? What's your just overall thought on that?
Right. So first of all, my overall thought is that any unsolicited email from some SEO company telling you that you have to sign up with them, usually is a red flag. Exercise caution, because for the most part, people that are offering services like you will find you in a natural way because of the great information that you provide. You don't have to come up with like some really cheap sales pitch. So as far as the disavow file and like toxic links, so this has kind of gone through a metamorphosis over the years with Google. But over the past few years, Google has definitely moved in the direction where they say and they claim that if they're bad links, for the most part, they're going to ignore them, and they basically devalue them. So they're kind of neutralized for the most part. So if you take Google by their word, and I think most SEOs appreciated that. So basically, I was once in a webinar. I think it was an SEO webinar. I think it was with John Mueller. And there was a guy that was actually part of this webinar, and he was discussing how he deals with his disavow file. And this was a few years ago when this was a little more prevalent. And he basically, his sole job for this company, he worked for some enterprise company, and his sole job was updating their disavow file. And he had to update it a few times a day. So you actually had a guy whose sole position was, updating toxic links. And I was just like blown away that that there could be someone that's devoted his entire, 9 to 4 is 9 to 5, his 40 hours a week towards, just dealing toxic links. That kind of blew me away. But the thing is, like I was saying, that these days Google actually, they say that they devalue it. So for the most part, you could completely ignore it. But and it's something that I wouldn't be concerned, and that's, in the general. With that said, I believe that it's not always 100% black and white, and it's not clear cut. And of course, we like to think that they're ignoring bad links, but there, I'm sure, are exceptions. And I think that what you have to do is take the overall picture into account when it comes to these things. So like one exception is obviously if you're dealing with some sort of a penalty, whether it's an algorithmic or manual penalty. So then obviously, you're going to want to look at everything. And then if you have bad links, you'll probably just want to take care of it just to make sure like you're doing everything you could to help your site. But even if, let's say, you're not dealing with a penalty, I guess the only time that I'd be concerned is in a case where there was like a tremendously high percentage of bad links vis-a-vis good links. And the type of links that when I look at, they give off the strong impression that someone is trying to game the system or be manipulative, or something like that. So then that's something that maybe I would want to look at. And like I said, it's not a decision I'd make on my own. I'd consult an expert, and then maybe I'd sort of maybe think about a disavow as sort of a preventative measure just to preempt any sort of future penalty. So if I saw something fishy like that, then maybe that's something I'd consider. But in general, like what you said, the normal case, the guy has 200 links, and he's got a few links that look a little fishy, or they're not the highest quality. For the most part, in general, Google's ignoring those, and it's something that I would completely ignore. I wouldn't worry at all, and I'd focus all my attention on a very forward-thinking attitude and just try to think how I can build great links going forward, and wouldn't worry at all about the rotten apples.
I think that's a mini lesson of itself right there on the disavow file. And I completely agree with all of that, even to the extent that where you said, and I completely agree, where they're devaluing and kind of ignoring these bad links, where I think it's almost, just from my mindset, a scarcity versus abundance mindset. Okay, so you're not ranking, so you're going to remove your only links you have. That's the wrong mindset. Okay, just go get good links. Do the tactics to obtain good links, and then your overall percentage of quality links will be higher. Google will recognize that you're a good site doing the right thing. And so I think that when I see that, and I hear occasionally our clients will say, hey, I've got these, I'm getting hit with negative SEO. I'm like, well, are you? And how do I even know, or how does anyone know other than Google, if even those links are bad?
100%. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. And like what you say, just because someone thinks that they're hit with a negative SEO, but you know what, because they had one day little traffic, you have to really take the full picture. And it's like what you're saying, you mess with the disavow file, and you could end up really shooting yourself in the foot, because you don't know what's helping you, and you don't know what's considered natural and what's normal part of the backlink profile. And they're just some links that everyone's going to have, that like 20% of links that you don't really care about, but they don't provide any value. And yeah, like what you said, for the most part, I'd completely ignore those and wouldn't pay any attention. But like what you were saying, you really have to take the whole picture into account. So, if someone is looking at their backlink profile and they have like 90% using, the same anchor text of, local lawyer in Lakewood, New Jersey, that's where we're located. So something like that, like, would maybe concern me, because that maybe gives off sort of the impression that you're trying to game the system. But those low quality links, it's like what you're saying, they may not even be indexed in Google. Like, my bet is that if you take a lot of those links and you would show your client, that's what I would do. I would say, show me one bad link. And I just take that link and pop it into Google and, do site colon, the link, the URL of the link. And for the most part, Google doesn't even index those pages. They're so low value.
Right. 100% agree. And let's transition over to, let's kind of do rapid fire just overview of specific link building tactics that are available to attorneys? Because everyone listening is probably like, yeah, we understand this is great. You need to have links, but how do we obtain them? So first, let's talk about directories. What's their level of importance? Are they important? What's your overall thought about directories?
So I think that for the most part, any backlink profile is going to have foundational links, and that's what I mean by that is like just the basics, just the normal, and they're gonna within that natural backlink profile, you'll even have no follow links, which I think are also important. So that's just the normal healthy backlink profile. And as far as like SEO benefit, although it may not be driving like, in a direct way rankings, I think that they do play an important role. And when you're talking about directories and citations and things of that nature, I definitely think that it's something that you should take seriously and that you should do. And if let's say just you ignore that completely and you just ignore the basic yellow pages, Yelp, and all those listings and citations, I think that probably the website that didn't ignore that and that was taking care of their citations and had those all in order, I think would be ahead if everything else is equal. So that's certainly something that I take care of, and that's more from like a foundational point of view, like the foundational link that every website is almost like expected to have. So that's for sure my basic approach. Now, the one thing that I like to, one kind of a tip that I like to recommend when we're talking about citations is that most SEOs are focused on like the basic citations when you're dealing with the national names, the big players, the names that everyone's heard of, the type of citations that you could get when you use a service like Yext and things like of that nature. Some people do it manually, which is great as well. And that's sort of the regular approach that SEOs take. And like I said, I don't think anyone should overlook those, and you should definitely have those. But when you're talking about competitive niches, such as like the legal niche and local things, so I think that there's a lot more you could do on the citation front, and things that you could think out of the box that you could really kind of distinguish yourself from your competitors. And what I mean by that is that instead of just thinking about the national players, which you should do, but think outside of the national players and try to think even more relevant and maybe more grassroots. So what I have in mind is like think about niche directories. So everyone's thinking about the national, the Yext players, but what about your local city? What about your local town? That's definitely something that I'd look into, and that's something that probably your competitors never thought of and never considered. And I believe that those would send super strong signals to Google, and about your location. And then there are also niche industry directories that I'd certainly take care of if I were really serious about my citations. The other thing that I'd recommend, and this is like if you really want to go for the gold and really like create distance between you and your competitors, is I take the whole citations directories things to a whole new level. And I guess I'd look around my area for associations, for business associations. So every area is going to have, whether you're in Chicago, Illinois, whether you're in Lakewood, New Jersey, you could do simple Google searches, and you could do associations, business associations, professional service associations. And this is like a totally new way of thinking of things, or a different way than most people think when they think citations. And when you become a part of an association, it's not just simply a listing, which is good, but it's much more than that. You're actually becoming a member and you're joining a community of local vendors. And a lot of these associations are going to have fees associated with it. But I'm happy to pay those. I personally am part of a couple of associations where we're part of a couple of New Jersey associations. And you're not paying for a link. That's not what you're paying for. You're paying for, they probably don't even know what link building is. You're paying to be a part of a group of local vendors and a community, a member of a local community. sharing sources and things like that. And the link is just happens to be the icing on the cake. So if you think like in terms of that, I could assure you that these type of local signals that you get from these sort of associations and niche directories and things like that will send super strong levels of credibility and just further and higher degrees of authority to your company and your website. And things that your competitors aren't even talking about, things that probably we wouldn't even be talking about on a normal basis in a normal podcast. People are thinking about, everyone's focused in on that. So it's just an awesome opportunity, and it's simple, and it will help your rankings like crazy, and it will give you a lot of distance between you and your competitors. So that's something else to think of. Another thing that just comes to mind is like, it's along the same lines of associations. Just Google, you Google Chicago, Illinois Business Associations, Google Chicago, Illinois Chamber of Commerce. You'll find a ton of highly authoritative websites. You'll have to do a little filtering, and you'll have to spend some time behind your keyboard, and you can't just hire a service that could do this, but it will take you a few hours, and this will really give you the win, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so 100% agree. One of the first things that I do are the Chamber of Commerce for cities. I think it's a huge advantage. And I think
Awesome.
that, particularly in the personal injury vertical, doing your foundational directories, you have to do that. If you don't do that, you're losing out. And I think what you're talking about is creating like a gap of other directories that are a little bit harder to obtain. They take just a little bit more effort. You gotta look at a niche level, for those legal specific sites, or you got to look at a geographic level for those associations or chambers. And I think those little additional 1% efforts into these types of links are what really helps an individual stand out in a local 3-pack.
100%. I mean, I totally agree with that, because everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's ordering Yext. So yeah, that is expected. It's not something I would overlook. And I'm sure some people, use the white page or the yellow pages and Yelp every now and then. And it's definitely something I'd consider. But like, really, if you want to set yourself apart, that's really the way to go. And that's going to send super strong signals. And like what you're saying, if you really want to distinguish yourself in the local pack, that's a good place to start.
Great. Okay, let me jump over to one that's a little bit more contrarian, a little bit more. Let me ask you this: is there really a difference between guest posting and blogger outreach?
Okay, so guest posting and blogger outreach. So I've heard distinctions, nitty gritty distinctions over the years between those terms. I hear new terms coming up like content link building. For the most part, I think they're all very similar concepts where you have a contextual link. You have a link within a relevant piece of content, and whether you're referring to it as one or the other, I'd venture to say that it's 99% semantics and 1% splitting hairs. So not sure if that's something that SEO companies are using now as part of like their sales pitch or whatever. I don't know if I've seen that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Nothing would surprise me. But I honestly don't believe that, because one link is called a guest post versus being called a blogger outreach, or versus being called content link building. Somehow it's going to be more effective, and like you're going to get better results. I definitely don't believe in anything to that effect, because at the end of the day, the sole thing that's going to define the effectiveness of a link is going to be 100% decided based on the quality of the website and some of the things like we discussed earlier, those different factors that make up a good link, and the relevancy. And it's going to have 100% to do with that, and absolutely nothing to do with the terminology used to describe it.
100% agree. Okay, so I got to follow up on that. Where would you place PBNs in that context? And I'll lead out of the gates here. For those listening, private blog network, everyone shudders when they hear that term. But what if the private blog network, the actual site that was created, is actually super high quality and has great content? Is that something different, or is it still just taboo and you should avoid it at all costs?
Right. So I think the way that you're describing the PBN, where it has great content and everything's good about it, I think that a lot of times when people use the terminology PBN, they kind of think of like a network of sites that are all working together, and where, if one would get penalized, the other one could, and like, Google's busted like these networks and things of that nature. So you have a lot of sites that are interconnected. And basically all of the sites were created solely for the purpose of propping up SEO efforts. So when you're talking in PBNs in those terms, um, it's certainly not worth it to risk if you have any sort of website that you care about and that you want to wake up tomorrow morning and not have to think that your site's going to be off of the face of the earth. So it's certainly not worth it. But if you have someone that, he calls it a PBN, I mean, I don't know if he has a few different sites and really these two sites have nothing to do with each other, and everything about the site, he has quality guidelines and standards, and everything else meets up. So the fact that he calls it a PBN, I'm not really sure what would make that a PBN if everything else is good. But I think for the most part, when people think PBNs, they think simply someone created a bunch of fake sites with no real purpose other than to prop up your SEO. And if you're looking to get engaged in that, you better think twice. It seems totally not worth it to have to try to start from scratch with a new URL. You're probably better off just doing nothing.
I completely 100% agree with both examples you gave there. One being the complete network, you want to avoid that, and then the other could be a good site, and maybe the nomenclature's off there. And I think that the nomenclature in itself is an interesting conversation that we could go down a rabbit hole, where when SEOs, when they're doing negative based selling, they'll say, "Hey, that firm's using PBNs." Okay, then the next step up is, "Oh, they're guest posting. You can't do guest posting. You should do blogger outreach." And then the step above
Right.
blogger outreach is, "Oh, you should do digital PR." It's such a
Right.
joke. It's, in my opinion, it's kind of a pet peeve. It's just semantics. Is the site good? Does it provide value? Is it relevant or not?
100%. And you know what they say, that when you point your finger at someone, their four fingers pointing back at you. So if someone's just looking at everyone else, and for the most part, I've seen that it's very easy to try to be critical and call other people's work by names and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, anyone could say that about anyone else. But when you're deciding the quality of a link, it all boils down to the quality of the website. You have to look around, you have to look at all the factors that we discussed earlier, and it's all going to boil down to that, and nothing to do with how you call it or the terminology. I mean, that's just complete sales.
Yep.
Snake oil sales.
Totally. So I got a few more tactics here just to kind of briefly cover. So your thoughts on Harrow, help a reporter out.
So I think that there is some potential there, but I think for the most part, it's going to be hard to really connect with a journalist in a way that would give you the coverage that you're hoping. So it's something that we've dabbled with in the past, and I have some other SEO people that I'm in touch with that also have agencies, and it's something that we've discussed over the years as well. And they've also tried it, and honestly, they haven't had much success. The concept makes a lot of sense. If you could do something newsworthy, and you could do something to gain attention, and you could connect with a journalist, so that's awesome. But for the most part, if you want to go that route, you're probably better served finding a journalist on your own that covers your niche. So if you're in a niche and you have a piece of content that seems like it did well, you could check those backlinks. You could see who covered that, and you'd probably get a lot further and save yourself a lot of time by kind of reverse engineering someone else who had success, and going it that route where just you try to meet random journalists and pitch different things, or they pitch you different things. So that's my
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And I got to give a plug to a previous interview with Cameron Harold, where his book, Free PR, really talks about this strategy where it's essentially creating your own list of media that you build a relationship with. And it's going to be easier to convert those situations, and you're going to stand out versus just kind of spray and pray, hoping one of your quote lands with help a reporter out, or even using like a distribution service like a PR Web, a Cision, a Newswire. But those have their different purposes. But
Yeah, that's
um,
a great point. I mean, if you could actually, build relationships with journalists. So if you're in a certain niche and industry and you could build that up and, you could develop a trust and a rapport with them, that's for the long run, you're building something that's really meaningful as opposed to just like, pitching random stuff.
yep, completely agree. All right, so let's do the next one that's kind of controversial, particularly in the legal vertical, scholarship EDU campaigns. Um, so essentially, where a law firm will create a scholarship, they'll offer some small monetary reward of $1,000 to $10,000, and for an essay contest or a video contest, and then that's where the firm will then reach out to universities to obtain a listing on their financial aid pages. What's your thoughts on those?
So I think that those are something that a few SEO lives ago was very helpful, and people had success with it. But in SEO, the lives change very quickly. So the thing is that really for the most part, those were very super easy links to get, and they weren't very complicated. And Google eventually recognized that those really aren't earn links that are based on merit. And for the most part, when you're going to be listed with hundreds of other scholarships, they don't really, I don't believe they provide any value. I've even heard that people have gotten penalized from doing that. So that's something that I'd be careful with. That shouldn't be like your link building approach. Shouldn't be like, you plan on like having 90% of your links from scholarship pages. I think there is, room to do a scholarship within, a normal backlink profile. So if you wanted to do like a real legit scholarship and really, help out people and students that, you feel like you could help out in a meaningful way, I think that that's totally fine. And you may get links and they may provide a little value as well. But definitely like, when you're talking about like link building and SEO strategies, it's not something that I'd have in my arsenal these days or that I'd rely on.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I wrote an article on Moz back in 2015 about how to do the scholarship campaigns. And back then, there wasn't a lot of people that would do them. And you would get listed on a financial aid page, and there'd be just a handful of other sites. But now, when you do it, there might be 200 to 1,000
Yeah.
different listings on the page.
100%. And we actually used to do it back in the day as well, but probably like we haven't been doing it since around 2015, 2016. That's when Google kind of started clamping down, and there were rumors, there was chatter of people dealing with penalties from that as well. But yeah, like the game's changed. So it's like what you're saying, when it was unique and when there was something special about it. So then, it provided value. But like as Google got smarter and everyone started doing it, so it definitely lost its luster.
Completely agree. So now I'm going to read a quote. I know for a fact that you've heard this quote, but I want to let you respond to this and just kind of give me your overall thoughts. Here's the quote. It's from John Mueller. I love some of the things I see from digital PR. It's a shame it often gets bucketed with the spammy kind of link building. It's just as critical as technical SEO, probably more so in many cases.
Right. So I think that was actually a pretty sweet plug for link building, which you normally don't hear from the Google seniors. So that's what I take out of that. And I think that what John Mueller is saying is an important fact in that there is kind of, we touched on guest posting. We didn't talk a lot about it, but I think like with guest posting and that sort of tactic, there is kind of a misconception that somehow this method of building links will be effective on its own 2 feet, and you could sort of like, let's just rely on a guest post or blogger outreach to to prop up your rankings. So in theory, old school way of thinking of things is you have a 10-page website. It isn't providing any sort of value with engaging content or resources. And then somehow you could just build links, whether it be guest posts or something else. And those are just going to be your silver bullet. And you could basically just guest post your way to success. Um, and that's kind of old school and outdated. And I think that's what John was kind of hinting to, because when you just link to some sort of promotional page or sales page or monies page, those type of links really add absolutely no value whatsoever to your guest post. So when you think of having a link in a guest post and you're linking to something, this is like what we were touching on when you asked me the original question, what makes a great link? So what are you, is your link actually adding value to this article? Like imagine with that link, you would take a piece of that article and you would place it in this guest post. So you would basically take a piece of the page that you're linking to, and you would put it in parentheses or in a footnote on this guest post. So imagine that you're doing that and you're reading a guest post and reading an article, and you're linking to some guy's sales page or some guy's money page. So essentially the way that the article reads is like, it's giving us content, it's giving us content. And then there's like a giant billboard right in the middle of this article as basically a sales pitch. It doesn't really add any value whatsoever. And what Google is really looking for when determining the quality and effectiveness of links, I think what John was alluding to, are links that actually provide value and live up to the expectations of the whole purpose of links that they were intended to do, is to bridge two pieces of relevant content on two different ends of the internet. So it's really, really important these days to not just think of links exclusively and how many guest posts you need or things like that, but you really have to think much more in a holistic sort of approach, and to develop, to think about how you're going to develop resources and content on your site that is link worthy and is actually adding value, so that when you link to it from a guest post, these two pieces of content are actually complementing each other, versus I think what he means by spammy is just like links that you're simply stuffing into content for the sole purpose of SEO to just boost your rankings. Because although on the outside it may look like it's helping you, it's coming from a guest post, it's a great site, the content is relevant, and it's a do follow link, right? But nevertheless, for the most part, in my opinion, you're shooting blanks if you're just linking to some money page. So SEOs really have to get this through their mind. And I know it's really hard to do that since it was so effective and you used to be able to do that and it helped so much, but they really have trouble, changing their mentality. And the thing with SEO, I mean, I say this with a lot of things, is like, there's no future in the past. And especially when it comes to SEO, there's no SEO, you have no SEO future if you're still living in the past. So you really have to start thinking of SEO in terms of providing resources, content on your site that is actually linkable.
Yeah, I think that was very powerful, David. And I think that it's absolutely true. You can't live in the past. And I learned my lesson really hard back in the day. I'm holding up an Easy Articles mug.
Yeah.
Back in 2011, I got smacked around pretty hard because, I was taking the lowest barrier to obtain a backlink. The content on the site wasn't great. But back in 2008 to 2011, that worked until 100%. That first penguin algorithm. So now the game has changed. You got to provide quality all around on the site, on the external site, the internal site. The UX has to be there. It's harder, but the game has changed and you just have to evolve.
100%. And it's like what you say, it's definitely not easier. Links still are fundamental, but it's not just links anymore. What's changed is that, your internal SEO, the content, the resources that you're linking to, and do things add up? Are things adding up? Are you just putting a giant advertisement to your site and some sales pitch in the middle of some guest post? That's not going to provide any value. That's a complete dud. So, these guys are like so focused on building links, and, they have a 10-page site and they're really not thinking like about developing content. Then, you're going to be severely disappointed with the results.
100% agree. We got two final questions here, David. So first one, David, why do personal injury attorneys need to focus on link acquisition strategies?
So, with personal injury attorneys, as with any super competitive niche, you're not going to be able to get by just, doing the basics and just relying on those foundational links. Maybe the local mechanic could, maybe your local, if you're in a small town, maybe your local eatery could. But when you're dealing with very high value clients and leads and such a highly competitive niche, so you're really going to have to, you're in a much more competitive state of SEO. And, you're really not going to get very far, just like every correlation study has always proved that link building that SEO requires links as in order to be successful. So any competitive niche does. Now, it's possible if, very small competitive niches could just have a few links, but, all you have to do is look at the number one result and see their backlink profile. And you'll understand very quickly that Google clearly relies on these signals to create a sense of credibility for you and for your site, and in turn will help you rank in the organic results and also the local pack as well.
Yeah, and if the personal injury attorney is listening, want an example, go look at forthepeople.com and look at their link profile, and that'll be a real eye opener on why they're generating so much organic traffic. It's because they have a very robust link building link profile. And then David, final question here. It's been so great speaking with you. I love the SEO. Diving deep here, we really hit some great things. But where can people go to learn more about you?
So the upperranks.com, and we have a blog. I write about link building. I've been a little slower lately, but you could kind of see all the philosophy that we spoke about in the long version, if you will, and the upperranks.com. And Chris, once again, I'm always up to speak SEO, to speak link building. So really appreciated this opportunity. Really had fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too.